Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, to the audience in the room and those connected online. My name is Patrizia Gragnani, and I'm from the Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies and from the UNESCO Chair on Urban Resilience at the University of Southern Denmark. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming you to our side event, Raising the Ambition of Climate Action at Urban Level, Recommendations for Policymakers. Today, we have here a lineup of distinguished speakers that will touch upon different aspects related to urban climate action through a multi-level governance perspective. We will hear about key international urban initiatives from the Ministerial Meeting on Urbanization and Climate, CHAMP, Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnership, and SURGE, Sustainable Urban Resilience for the Next Generation. We will look at the nationally determined contributions through the lens of urban content, water, and finance, and we will hear about the health and climate interlinkages. We will talk about raising climate ambition at the regional and at the local level, including through public-private partnership and planning for urban adaptation. So I will now call to the stage here Professor Nicola Tollin, UNESCO Chair on Urban Resilience at the University of Southern Denmark, for the opening remarks. Nicola, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Patrizia. I would like to start thanking the co-organizer of this event, the University of Bristol, the Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies, University IUAV of Venice, United Nations Human Settlement Program, United Nations Development Program, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, the European Committee of the Region, the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability, and UNESCO Intergovernmental Program, Hydrological Program. I would like also to welcome and to thank the co-chairs of this side event, starting from Dr. Seneca Basnayake of ADPC, Professor Marco Frey from Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies, Professor Francesco Musco from University of Venice, and Dr. Colin Nolden from University of Bristol, and also from my side, also warm welcome to our distinguished speakers. Just to set a little bit the ground of the side event today, I would like to restate some fundamental messages coming out also from the negotiations so far in this very COP. We are all aware that we are lagging behind for mitigation and adaptation action. And the national government are also a bit struggling in fulfilling their commitment, leaving an open space that shall be strongly and immediately filled up. I'm very happy that this COP, local governments, cities and regions are actually boldly and strongly filling up this space, as it's clear not only from international commitment and collaboration, but also from action that we're seeing happening on the ground in all corners of the globe. Because apart having cities taking a prime role in the implementation of the Paris Agreement and its operationalization, we do need action. And this action is happening and shall happen more at urban level. Through the support also of a multi-level collaboration in between national governments and between subnational governments and local communities as well. Making sure that local action is aligned and helping raising ambition of national policies and plans, but also that local action is supported with financial, legal framework and capacity from national level. We do need, and in city it's indeed possible, to have an approach that's multi-sectorial. We need more action that are integrating mitigation and adaptation, and in city this is indeed possible. We need to harmonize, and this panel is a representation of how progress is done in order to harmonize and integrate action from different type of stakeholders. And again, I'm very happy to have so many here today in this side event. And that will include also a more prominent role of bilateral and multilateral donor organizations. Finally, and that's a role that primarily, but not in isolation, of university, we do need to have data and knowledge to support a low-carbon resilient transition. In order to support evidence-based decision-making, to support policy, and to support action on the ground. Here I stop this opening remark and start to set the scene with some of an overview of the work that we've been developing since 2016 together with the United Nations Human Settlement Program in analyzing the urban content of the national attainment contributions. We've been publishing a global analysis report last year, presented at the COP last year. And now, in the next few months, we will be releasing a new report, this time also in collaboration with the United Nations Development Program, where we have updated the global analysis, and we have been developing, as we will see in a minute, country brief for 194 countries, and also we have been trialing country profile, looking also at other national climate policies in 15 countries with the support of country office staff from both UNDP and UN-Habitat. This is the overall picture as updated this year, and in this case, on the positive side, we can see that there is a large number of NDCs that are mentioning urban sector. 27% are defining urban sector as a priority for climate action. But from the other side, we know that there is much more work to do, that our challenges and actions are portrayed in the NDCs at urban level need to be further strengthened, and they need to be strengthened particularly through appropriate means of implementation, finance, technology, and institutional capacity. Here just an highlight of which are the priority in terms of mitigation and adaptation at urban level. And regarding mitigation, we can see energy, transport, mobility, and waste as to be the primary one, but we have an immense space to occupy regarding built environment, for example. We have in terms of adaptation, infrastructure, and water as the lead, but we have much more to do also regarding human health, for example. As I said, this year we are not just portraying in this new report a global analysis, but we start to enter country level. And these are the brief that we prepare for 194 countries. This is an example from Colombia, where it's clear the way in which we are looking at national and urban level, their interlinkages by sector for mitigation and adaptation in order to understand which are the key leverage points where we should strengthen the NDC in the future. Finally, we need to have more urban content in NDC. We need to support countries to develop a stronger NDC in dialogue with the subnational government. And for doing this, and here I will conclude, we also start to prepare in collaboration with UN-Habitat, UNDP, and GGGI, GERIX, and other key organizations, a series of policy briefs translating the analysis of the urban content NDC into policy recommendations. The first 7 are already prepared, will be published in the next few months, and the second batch is already on the way. And I will stop here, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Nicola, for your opening remarks and your insights on the NDCs. Our next speaker is Claudia Ortiz, United Nations Development Program. Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrizia, and thank you to the University of Southern Denmark for hosting this very important event. It's really fantastic to see how many stakeholders gather here to really get down and deeper into what it really means to do climate action at the local level. I think it is a momentous time. So also acknowledging that James Venner, my UNDP colleague, is not here. I'm going to do my best to very well represent his work with all of you. So I'm Claudia. I'm part of the Climate Hub of UNDP, and under our flagship initiative of the Climate Promise, we support over 120 countries in their NDC development and also in the implementation. So we develop also a lot of intelligence on these NDCs. So for example, looking at how many of them tackle gender, how many tackle adaptation. So in this case, obviously knowing that adaptation is at the local level, that mitigation, emissions, reducing emissions really is something that is measured at the local level. Getting deeper into what it takes to do NDCs in urban spaces, in villages, in towns is critical and really important. So we're very happy to partner with everybody here on that. If we can go to the next slide. Oh, I have a clicker. I am very sorry. Okay, so why are cities important? This is where, again, the core of the action happens, right? We know that the population in cities is only expected to grow in the coming years, in the coming decades. It also means that the highest impact of a mitigation ambition action, for example, is going to have a higher impact in cities. And same with adaptation. So this is why this is really important. They also contribute way more, around 70% to the global GDP, obviously, and it drives the economy of the country. Actually, in 2021, under the Climate Promise, we did a review with different stakeholders to really try to understand, like I said, different trends of these NDCs. And what we noticed in terms of subnational and urban action is that in the first phase of the Climate Promise, it was 54 out of 100 countries that highlighted urban aspects of mitigation and adaptation. And in the second phase, it was 41 out of 48. So in terms of percentage, it was a lot more. We also have data where we see that the alignment of national to local is more prominent now, and also city climate action plans and urban resilience and sectoral projects are more and more defined in this generation of NDCs. To note, we're embarking in a process of the next generation of NDCs, so this work that has been done here is really important to really inform policymakers and especially also local decision makers on how they can contribute to a more robust generation of NDCs, capturing this local level data. So as Nicola mentioned, there's already a study of 194 NDCs, and he presented on the country snapshots. What I'm going to focus on here are these country profiles. We are working to finalize between 15 and 20 country profiles that have qualitative urban data as opposed to quantitative. They will be providing strong entry points for policy review and recommendations. These were done jointly with UN-Habitat, with local information from our local offices on the ground. We have consistent templates, and I will not go in detail to the insights of these country profiles, but I will walk you through what is included in these templates. And if you have additional questions, we will be sharing this slide deck and more information also after the panel. We engage government counterparts to be able to secure buy-in in these country profiles and gain more nuanced understanding. Actually, the methodology was pilot tested in Fiji in August of this year, so that served as a platform for us to be able to continue the research. So really briefly, this map gives you an idea of the countries that were selected for this particular country profiles and the criteria that we use. So we wanted to make sure that obviously the country selected had progressive and ambitious NDCs. Also, we wanted to have some regional and geographic distribution. And also because we do this jointly with UN-Habitat, we wanted to make sure that we had collectively a strong presence in these countries and a strong experience. So as I mentioned, we developed a consistent template for the country profiles, and at the core of this template is really what kind of legislations and strategies at the national level really contribute and highlight urban issues. So this helps us to ensure buy-in and allows for also a more nuanced understanding of urban climate change. As we can see here, for example, in Fiji, What was notable is in terms of this kind of legislation and strategies is that there was a lack of a disaster risk reduction strategy and disaster risk reduction plans and land use plans. Further, we also go in analyzing the mitigation challenges and the mitigation opportunities. So again, where are the emission reductions planned? And also, where would we have more impact with mitigation actions? So for example, here you can see mitigation responses. In the case of Lebanon, rehabilitation and upgrade of public grid, and decreasing grid losses and improved efficiency. That was one of the strategies that was noted in terms of mitigation responses. Same with adaptation. I realize that I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to keep going. And lastly, in means of implementation. So what needs and gaps and what tools are needed in order to deliver and implement mitigation and adaptation in urban settings? And actually, I just want to really quickly point out these recurring areas of emphasis in the climate profiles that we saw. So first, adopting a risk-sensitive and land use planning. Second, identifying safe areas to guide new urban development. Identifying at-risk areas to manage existing risk. Improving resilience through protection of human lives and enhancing and sustaining economic growth. And finally, which could be the potential investors or financiers that really face the challenge at the local level and that need to be able to have better climate data to assume risks. So with this, I'll give it back to Nicola. And thank you so much for this, to Patrizia, and thank you so much for this opportunity to present the country profiles.
Thank you, Claudia, for expanding on NDCs. Our next speaker is Bernard Barth, United Nations Human Settlement Program. Bernard, please come here. Bernard.
Thank you very much, Patrizia, and apologies for being late, and thank you for shuffling the program around. I will only speak to one slide, really, because it illustrates our journey in terms of the engagement on NDC, multi-level climate action, and you can see the arrows go forward in terms of our future trajectory. You can see two streams, our engagement on top, indicating the work that we have done on NDCs, the urban dimension of NDCs. I think many of you would know certainly the second publication, of course, which we've developed with Nicola and team, which clearly spelled out how strong the urban dimension, sustainable urban development, is captured in the NDCs or not. We've developed a few tools. We're looking now through all of these documents moving forward, and the deeper we dig, the more challenges I think we are identifying. And you've seen already in previous slides how strongly the urban dimension is captured in the NDCs, and you also have a sense of where we want to go with this at the country level. At the bottom, and I'll get back to that in a moment, at the bottom you see a parallel process which is equally important, or maybe a more traditional way for UN-Habitat to approach multi-level climate action by looking at the urban policy framework, and this is just demonstrated through a few policy guidance tools and assessments that address the climate dimension in national urban policies. I want to highlight two key moments in a way. You can see the second publication on, well, maybe you cannot, I can't even read it, the climate change in national urban policies. Anyway, it's about urban policies. What we have done with this process, we looked at the entire urban policy framework in countries, and we've compared that at that stage really for the first time with the NDCs, with the climate change policies, and not too big a surprise, there is very little policy alignment. horizontal policy alignment. What the climate change policies say, what the urban policies say, is not aligned. So for us, that was one really big step in terms of digging deeper into the NDC work, doing the country analyses that Claudia also just presented. And now what we are trying to do with this is really twofold, is to have a much stronger analysis of what's happening at the country level across different policies, what needs to be done then for policy alignment, and of course, most importantly, how can the urban and the climate dimensions in terms of sustainable urban development move forward in an integrated manner. So moving away from that analytical part, I think for us, and many of you, of course, have been involved in LCAS and the Local Climate Action Summit, maybe attended the ministerial meeting on urbanization and climate change. What we are really trying to do is move towards a new round of NDCs that are much more ambitious in terms of the urban dimension. Yes, there are a good number of NDCs that have urban as a pillar, but I think there are 16, right, that have actually costed urban dimensions included. So there's a very long way to go. If the NDCs are supposed to be a key funding instrument, a key policy mobilization, a key international advocacy instrument, then they need to change in the 2025 reiteration. That's my personal opinion. Institutionally for UN-Habitat, the other side of the coin is we are ready, also with UNDP and other partners, to provide that support for the integration of a very strong urban dimension into national urban policies. And taking this analysis forward will help really then at the country level with a much stronger framework to see where to plug in. I won't go into the implementation plans, but in a way the story is the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard, for your insights. Our next speaker is Gino van Begin, ICLEI, Local Government for Sustainability. Gino, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Professor Tollin, for inviting me. My name is Gino van Begin. I'm the ICLEI Secretary General. ICLEI is a network of local and regional governments working with around 2,500 cities, towns, and regions around the world. We are in the business of climate action at the local or urban level since 1992, so more than 30 years. We, within our membership, what we have been doing is in particular supporting local and regional governments in the design and implementation of their climate action plans. Since then, we take a holistic and integrated approach by helping them to get their baselines done through greenhouse gas inventories, protocol that we have set up for that, then to help them to set reduction targets, obviously, to then help them also with the implementation of the action plans, and then finally to do the monitoring and reporting via our CDP ICLEI track. That is basically going on the local level. In addition, we are founders of a number of initiatives, such as the GCOM initiative, to push even more action on the ground. When it comes to the international level, ICLEI holds the focal point to the UNFCCC for local and regional governments. So that is the mechanism through which we try and hopefully successfully influence the negotiations of the UNFCCC, in particularly since 2008, when at that time when nations were embarking towards the Paris Agreement. We were very happy to see that in the Paris Agreement we could achieve at least that there is a recognition of local and regional government action to support and implement with national governments the Paris Agreement. However, as we speak now here today, and this COP28 is about a global stocktake, the very first since the coming into force of the Paris Agreement. And it's very clear that through this global stocktake, the national targets that are being put on the table are not sufficient to bring us or keep us on a 1.5 track. Hence why it is so important to now look really on what is going on at the level of local and regional governments throughout the world, and to try to convince parties to support that action on the ground. And we have now, towards this COP28, worked together with the COP28 presidency, with Special Envoy Michael Bloomberg, and all of the various networks and initiatives come together to design a new instrument which is called CHAMP, the Coalition of High Ambition Multi-Level Partnerships for Climate Action. This is a mechanism or a pledge that nations, parties here to the UNFCCC undertake. They commit essentially to raise the ambition of their own domestic national targets for the Paris Agreement through local and regional government input actions, both also in terms of the action that is going on, as well as support for the financing. We are very happy that this CHAMP has been launched here at the COP. Perhaps you were there at the LCAS, the Local Climate Action Summit that convened back-to-back with the World Climate Action Summit. Until now, 66 parties have endorsed this pledge. Major parties still have to endorse it. I'm looking towards China and India, for example, who have not yet endorsed it. And this is interesting, and this is perhaps here the point that I wanted to make in particularly. So whilst we have CHAMP, and I think the mobilization towards parties is definitely going on also this week, it's interesting to see, and thank you, Professor Tollin, especially, and our colleagues at UN-Habitat for this excellent study that was made in terms of urban components in existing NDCs. We could see that the large emitters in absolute terms, so China, United States, India, and Indonesia, besides some of the European countries taken together, if it is at the European Union level, have in their current NDCs very strong components, and that is what we want to build upon. So I was very happy to see that the United States, for example, is indeed an endorser of CHAMP. Now, what does it mean? Actually, it means that nations will now, from the 14th of December onwards until the COP30 in 2025, will need to sit down with their subnational governments to look into what actions they really have, what programs do they have, which can be further supported by the national government itself or by the international community. So we are looking forward to see a structured dialogue starting with a clear identification of particular measures that can be undertaken to help the implementation of the Paris Agreement, both in mitigation as well as in adaptation. There are a couple of examples that I would just like to give. For example, India, in its NDC of today, has a very clear project where it wants to construct and develop a solar energy-powered airport. So India clearly says, through this project, we will save as many emissions, it costs as much, the implementation period will be. So, you know, these are the kind of things, big projects that are indeed imagined, but that are sustainable, that are climate resilient, and that help, of course, to the development of the country, but at the same time also the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So looking forward that the endorsers of the CHAMP will indeed engage in that process. We, from our side, with all my colleagues at the other networks, will help parties to get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gino, for your interesting insights. Our next speaker is Maria Nera, World Health Organization. Please, Maria, come here. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here with you. Let me ask you a question instead of making a presentation. Do you have an idea how many liters of air we need every day, each of us? Guess, who wants to give a figure? No idea. Nobody wants to take a risk. Come on, huh? 22 liters. Between 10,000 and 50,000 liters are the ones that we need every day to breathe and to keep us alive. Were you expecting that figure? Okay, now let's move to the next question. We need to breathe this from the air. And if we live on those cities, this is the type of air that we need to be at least not killing us. And unfortunately, the air we are breathing is killing 7 million of us every year. Not to mention all the chronic diseases that will fill our hospitals and cost us a fortune in terms of health system and, of course, losing our quality of life. If I am bringing this figure to you, between 10,000 and 50,000 liters of air that we need every single day, a human body. This will go to the previous presenters. You were all looking for different solutions at the urban environment, how we need to plan for the different activities, the percentage of the population that will be living in urban environments. Imagine the importance that all of this urban planning is having for human health. So my point is that whenever you are doing an urban planning, whenever you are talking to the mayors, whenever you are developing those policy documents, whenever you are working with partners, putting in place different type of buildings, looking at sustainable transport systems, energy efficient, the type of energy we'll be using on our cities, keep in mind that all of that will have a very important impact in our health. Cities are the places where people will be sick or healthy. And that depends very much on the decisions and the planning that you will be putting in place. More and more public health communities and architects, urban planners, UN-Habitat, mayors. The mayors are our best, sorry, I shouldn't be saying best, but among the best ministers of health that we have in the 21st century. Don't say the best, because then the ministers of health will be very upset with me. But you are definitely the ones that will have an incredible capacity to make our life good, our health promoted, protected, prevented the diseases, or the ones that will be not doing enough to protect us. It's not just the air quality. Air quality, as I told you, represents 7 million deaths. So the decisions we'll be taking in our cities will be extremely important. Second is the food. If we don't have access to safe food, healthy food, not terribly expensive food, because that's the problem in most of our urban environments, that if you want fresh food, if you want healthy food, the prices will be probably higher, and then having access to processed food will be easier and it's cheaper. And the third one is about sedentary lifestyle or active lifestyle. So if you have cities where the sustainable transport system is promoted, where we remove cars and give that space for the human beings, means us, we have to be the protagonists of our cities, not the cars. The cars are now occupying, I don't know exactly the percentage of the space, but they are the king and the queen of the cities. And I want to be the queen of my city. And I'm sure you want to be the king, and Nicola wants to be the king of his city in Italy. And this is what is going to happen. If we do that, we will reduce 5 million deaths due by the fact that we don't have access to healthy diets. We will reduce 7 million deaths premature caused by exposure to air pollution, and we will reduce 1.5 million which are associated with sedentary lifestyle, taking us to chronic diseases, non-communicable diseases associated with sedentary lifestyle. So we have a fantastic agenda together. Let's join forces, because I think the health argument can give a very positive message to your citizens. This morning I was the youth, and one of them, he was an architect practicing here, and he was telling me, I fully agree with you, we shouldn't be calling it sustainable urban development. We should be calling it with the correct words, healthy urban development. That will be my dream. Maybe we can share it. It will be a healthy urban planning, healthy, sustainable if you want. We added as well urban planning for those cities where we can be the ones protecting our health and promoting nature-based solutions, all the solutions, energy efficient, different sources of energy, but fantastic public transport, and I'm sure that all of the agencies sitting here today will align into that. All for health. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Maria, for your insights. Our next speaker is Sarantuya Zandaria from the UNESCO Intergovernmental Hydrological Program. So Sarantuya couldn't join us here today, so we have a video instead. Could you please make the audio higher?
Water for Human Settlements in Division of Water Sciences of UNESCO in Paris. I'm happy to present key findings of an analysis of urban water contents in the nationally determined contributions to the UN-Habitat. This analysis has been carried out by UNESCO in partnership with the UNESCO Chair on Urban Resilience at the Southern Denmark University, led by Professor Tollin. Well, climate change is a global phenomenon, but its impacts are more severe in cities. More frequent and more intense extreme weather events such as floods, drought, and storms have devastating impacts on urban water services, such as water shortages, pollution surges in urban rivers, and damages to urban water infrastructure. A rise in temperatures and sea levels also threaten coastal cities. At the same time, being economic and industrial hubs, cities are major sources of greenhouse gas emissions and also major contributors to climate change consequently. Therefore, engaging cities in climate action both for mitigation and adaptation is important. Urban water-related mitigation and adaptation measures are of special importance because climate change impacts are manifested primarily through changes in the water cycle, affecting the availability and quality of water for cities and disrupting urban water services. Many cities are already engaged in water-related climate action, so to assess how urban water-related challenges and climate action are reflected in the NDCs, we are carrying out this analysis of urban water contents of the NDCs, which results I'm going to present. As of June 2023, in total 194 NDCs were submitted, which were all analyzed in the framework of this study. Out of these 194 NDCs, about two-thirds, or 129, have urban contents, which were further analyzed for urban water-related contents. If we look at these 129 NDCs with urban contents through a lens of urban water-related contents, the NDCs identify more urban water-related responses than challenges, both for adaptation and mitigation. In terms of climate hazards, NDCs identify more urban floods than urban drought as water-related climate hazards in urban areas. With regard to adaptation, almost half of these 129 NDCs identify water-related challenges and responses in urban areas, of which 18 have strong urban water-related adaptation content, meaning that these NDCs include both challenges and responses, whereas 42 have moderate urban water-related contents, adaptation contents, meaning that these NDCs identify either challenges or responses. As for mitigation, the number of NDCs with urban water-related mitigation challenges or responses is very low. In fact, only 10 NDCs have strong urban water-related mitigation contents, and 24 have moderate urban water-related mitigation contents. The findings of this analysis show that NDCs identify more urban water-related adaptation challenges and responses than mitigation challenges and responses. NDCs also identify more urban water-related responses than challenges, both for mitigation and adaptation. This suggests that there are more opportunities for urban water-related climate action for adaptation than for mitigation, although there is a potential for reducing emissions through better urban water management, such as circular economy approaches or energy neutral or even energy positive urban water services and facilities. These results furthermore show that more than half of the 129 NDCs with urban content have strong or medium urban water-related contents, both for adaptation and or mitigation. So these results emphasize the importance of water-related action in urban areas in national climate policies. It also shows that there is a room to strengthen urban water-related contents in the NDCs. So for this reason, UNESCO aims to carry out further in-depth analysis through country or regional case studies in the next phase. So the results of this analysis will be published by UNESCO in the coming months. With this, I would like to end my presentation, thanking once again the successful collaboration of the UNESCO Chair on Urban Resilience at the SDU, led by Professor Nicola Tollin. Thank you, and I wish you successful continuation of the side event.
So Sarantuya, if you're connected online, thank you for sending us this video. So our next speaker is Benjamin Jans from GCOM, Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. Ben, here you have the clicker. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Chair Professor Nicola Tollin, Chair in many senses, but also of this session in particular, and for the opportunity. The Global Covenant has been a very proud supporter of this incredible work that's been taking place. I often joke that Nicola and Patrizia are among the most popular of researchers at the moment at the nexus of cities and climate change science. Look, we're at a very powerful moment at this point in time. You've heard colleague and friend Gino mention the power of CHAMP, the Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnerships, and what that brought through the local climate action summit held earlier in the first week of COP, putting cities, states, and regions on the agenda in a way that perhaps we've not seen just yet before. And through the Global Covenant, which, if you're not aware, is the world's largest alliance for city climate leadership, you see over here we count nearly 1 in every 8 people on the planet live in a city that is committed to the Global Covenant. We're very proud to bring on many of the cities that are also committed through ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability and many other city networks that we work with. There's a multifold opportunity here. One, through CHAMP, yes. The second, we saw obviously the second urban ministerial take place just a couple of days ago on Cities Day, and a really strong testament to the willingness of states, regions, of ministers to work together with cities as well to unlock that action, to unlock the financing that's needed to bring that to bear and to make sure that we can advance climate action significantly. And then last piece, and this one's nearer and dearer to my heart, the research and innovation that's required to move this forward as well, especially as we track closer to the IPCC's special report on climate change in cities and the need, I know there's many academics in this room, the need to feed up as much research as possible that is also practitioner-led in order to provide the most accurate picture of how cities and climate change science can come together. And this alliance stands ready at the forefront. Director Nera mentioned that we needed to be protagonists. There needed to be queens, and we have many queens across the many cities that we work with, and we're so proud to be working with the likes of Mayor Binaev Makati and Mayor Basualdo of Despenaderos in Argentina. Just to note, the cities that you see on this list could potentially reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally by 5.6 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalents annually by the year 2050. The potential is massive. And already we're seeing a lot of the targets being set. Again, at LCAS, there was the launch of the Integrity Matters for Cities, States, and Regions report, which puts into perspective the original Integrity Matters report launched by the high-level expert group that the Secretary General put together for COP27. Again, key in making sure that there's guidance for net zero commitments as they are made more and more frequently by cities, states, and regions. And then also, very proudly, I saw colleagues from World Resources Institute in the room just now, launching the multi-level climate action guide for decision makers alongside the multi-level governance atlas. We've heard multi-level governance a lot in this session alone, and it's key that we support that with as much capacity, as much technical assistance and expertise as possible. And again, bringing to bear the examples that World Resources Institute has brought together through more than 100 cities, states, and regions globally to show that they're already crossing these levels. Very quickly here, just wanted to flag that cities en masse are already moving faster than ever across what we term the city climate action journey. You have your commitment stage, you have your evidence gathering phase where you build your greenhouse gas emissions inventory, your city risk and vulnerability assessment, setting your goals, your targets. The number of climate action plans alone increased by more than 40% year on year, which is again testament to the readiness, the willingness of these local governments to act. And yet, we know, and if you've seen the program, I'm supposed to be talking about finance, and I'm getting to it, I promise. There's this gap in implementing action, especially when it comes to adaptation. There is a massive dearth, especially at project level, for the financing needed to implement action. And cities and local governments, states and regions as well, are asking for this en masse, and we need to respond holistically and with everyone in this room, because it's going to take all of us. So very proud, of course, to be working with Professor Tollin and team on exploring what that looks like, at least through the NDCs research. You've seen that 129 figure quite a lot already, but we're looking a little bit deeper as to which of these NDCs have an urban finance request. It's coming. It could be coming faster. There's a saying in Italian, my wife is Italian, bene ma non benissimo. It needs to come a little bit faster, and we need to work together to make that happen. And we need to make sure as well that we continue to quantify that. We understand, though, that it doesn't always happen in the NDCs. And so where we need to collect and measure all of that impact together, we need to be more creative, and I think we have some of the most creative minds in this room alone, and the Global Covenant is looking forward to working with everyone here to help make that happen. And this is my last slide. I've got the timesheet coming up here. We also need to make sure that these requests, that countries are empowered to be able to put these requests in there so that we can help cities, states, and regions and match them together, that they can work together much more closely to make this kind of multi-level governance, especially through the finance piece, a reality. And it just underscores the opportunity to work together more closely through initiatives like CHAMP and like SURGE, as you heard earlier, and to measure more comprehensively where these requests are coming from, the data that cities, but also states, regions, and national governments need in order to see this through. And again, through that, through research, through innovation, through all of the different partners here, the Global Covenant stands ready to work with everyone here to make this a reality. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Ben, for your insights. So I would like now to call the next panel. So please, all the next speakers, take a seat. So we will keep on talking about finance with our next speaker, which is Colin Nolden from the University of Bristol. Colin, here you have the clicker, and the floor is yours.
So hello, everybody. First of all, I'd like to extend my thank you to the SDU Chair, Nicola Tollin and his team, for chairing this event. And also, I need to make special thanks to the Cabot Institute for the Environment at the University of Bristol for paying for my trip here to COP28. So I'm going to talk about towards Article 6 markets for cities. So I'm just going to give you an idea of what Article 6 can potentially do. And this is very similar to what you probably have heard of in the context of voluntary carbon markets, if this is an area you're interested in. So an urban entity, if it wants to reduce carbon emissions, it usually starts with a calculation of the emissions that are to be reduced. This usually involves hiring an external entity. Is that better? This usually involves hiring an external entity with, sorry, I can just move on to the next one here. So this is a cycle of effectively creating credits at urban level. I'm just going to go through these individually. So you start, for example, say if you're a city and you want to reduce the emissions of your social housing stock, you might look at improving the energy efficiency, improving heating and cooling, making it more efficient. So you start off by hiring an external organization to calculate emission reductions of a mitigation project based on internationally recognized methodologies. These could be initially from voluntary carbon markets, but hopefully at some point also Article 6.4 emission reduction markets. Next thing, you will hire an external organization to measure social impact. This will probably become more important moving forward to ensure that there's multiple benefits that arise from emission reductions. Next thing, the carbon credits need to be verified and backed by certified emission reductions. This ensures the uniqueness and integrity of credits issued. Next thing, the carbon credits are sold on carbon markets. This usually involves an intermediary to lower risk and transaction costs and ensure the integrity of the process. And by selling the carbon credits, mitigation funds are unlocked. And the sale of carbon credits projected in the emission reduction calculation improves the mitigation investment case and attracts investors, which, going back to this point, of course, then incentivizes the calculation of emission reduction for projects. And the last point, then of course, it also supports mitigation activities. So the payment is then used to support investment, hopefully, in mitigation, but also increasingly in adaptation activities at urban level. So this is the cycle of carbon credit creation. And as I mentioned, this is basically the same for voluntary and compliance carbon markets. However, there's some crucial differences between voluntary and compliance carbon markets. I'm just mentioning here potential Article 6 markets. So voluntary carbon markets, they've come under a lot of criticism in recent months, in the last year, for the production of lots of questionable, if not fraudulent, credits. However, the pros are that voluntary carbon markets are tried and tested, and there's also no need for corresponding adjustments in countries' nationally determined contributions, which makes it quite an attractive proposition. However, as I just mentioned, the negative aspects are that at the moment, voluntary carbon markets are experiencing collapsing reputation, and as a result, demand is limited, if not actually declining. Article 6 carbon markets are as yet to be determined what they will actually look like. Article 6.2 is progressing well, some might argue. Article 6.4 markets are not there yet. However, there's potentially vast demand for carbon emission reductions if we can figure out a way of making Article 6 carbon markets actually work. And this, especially in the context of a climate club, and this is what I'll come back to in the next slide, as this is one of our research foci. Then Article 6 markets can build on the experience of the clean development mechanism. For all its flaws, it also produced some very useful insights in terms of how to do things better in the future. Now, the negative aspects are that corresponding adjustments might complicate it, although there is the potential of not requiring corresponding adjustments by creating mitigation contributions in the context of a climate club. This is something that was discussed at COP27. Let's see where that takes us at this COP. Finally, economies of scale might put urban solutions at a disadvantage compared to, say, large-scale solutions which are favoured by tech companies, which might affect particular technologies such as CCUS. So, the next steps, this relates to a research project that we're developing, so the SDU Chair of Urban Resilience, Nicola Tollin, together with Patrizia from Sant'Anna School and the University of Bristol. We're looking to explore what circumstances, or under what circumstances, subnational entities, urban areas access public and private finance for mitigation and adaptation action through Article 6. Next thing, we need to establish the legal, normative and operational feasibility of aligning subnational entities' mitigation ambitions with the Paris Agreement and against Article 6. And finally, we need to identify the preconditions for a climate alliance or climate club of urban areas to abide by net zero ambitions enshrined in Article 2 of the Paris Agreement, which is the 1.5/2 degree objective, and climate justice as defined by the common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capacity principles. And ultimately, the aim, of course, is then to draft a tentative governance architecture to launch an Article 6 Urban Area Climate Alliance. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Colin. Speakers, I am short, so when you come here, you need to adjust your mic to your height. So I will temporarily step down from my role of moderator, as the next speaker is myself. And today I will talk about the local climate plans in Denmark. So this project is a collaboration between the region of Southern Denmark, the SDU UNESCO Chair on Urban Resilience, Aalborg University, and Roskilde University. So this is an initiative by the regional administration to track the status on climate action to support the implementation of the climate plans. So together we have analyzed 22 municipalities and their local climate plans in the region of Southern Denmark. And we wanted to identify key challenges in the development and in the implementation of local climate plans. So Denmark is a very interesting case, mainly because it has national targets for mitigation, which municipalities need to adhere to. It has nationwide standardized framework for municipal climate plans, which facilitates the tracking process at the regional and at the national level, and it makes also the monitoring harmonized. Denmark is also the first country to mandate all its municipalities to adopt and develop local climate plans. And lastly, Denmark has the goal of becoming climate neutral by 2050 and to reduce its GHG emission by 70% by the year 2030 as an intermediate goal. So to support the municipalities in drafting their climate plan, a harmonized framework of C40's climate action planning framework has been provided to the 22 municipalities. And the municipalities were supposed to include both mitigation and adaptation in their climate plan. So to support municipalities, Realdania, C40, and Concito have developed a common framework for developing local climate plans. So in order to extract data and have an overview of the status of climate planning in the region, we have generated indicators for mitigation, adaptation, and implementation, including barriers to development and implementation. To undertake the analysis of the plan, we have developed an evaluation framework which includes emission inventories and their alignment with the national targets, climate risks, adaptation and mitigations, goal and actions by sector, and means of implementation and monitoring, reporting and validation, and stakeholders' involvement. So this novel evaluation framework is harmonized so that in the future it will allow to be integrated in the framework that we will use to analyze the NDCs and other national climate plans. So, according to the estimations, the progress of the region goes beyond the target of 2030. As you can see here, we are forecasting a reduction of 71% against the 70%, which was the goal of Denmark. So these calculations concern emission from 3 sectors, which you see highlighted here: energy, transport, agriculture, forestry, and land use, and other 2 optional sectors, which were waste, that includes also wastewater, and chemical processes. So it is worth to mention that the analysis of climate exposure and vulnerabilities, including future loss and damage, still needs to be strengthened. But when it comes to mitigation, there seems to be a direct link between the number of municipalities focusing their action on the first 3 sectors. Again, they are energy, transport, and agriculture, forestry, and land use, and the fact that they are actually compulsory. When it comes to adaptation, the risk of flooding is the most addressed in challenges, as you can see here in the graph. in goals and action and is directly linked to the fact that there are more data available when it comes to these two. Knowledge, hazards, and criteria for action prioritization. Okay, so the key takeaways for this project are that mitigation actions in the local climate plans are partially based on low carbon technologies that are not fully available and up and running, while we believe that they should be based on technology that is certain right now and is working right now. Most climate actions are conditional to financial resources not fully available, and again, this represents a risk. We should be considering what is certain in the future. Scope 3, which is the nemesis of whoever has to do CO2 accounting, shall be included. Municipalities should shift towards a multi-hazard approach, and the analysis of the exposure and vulnerabilities should be strengthened, including loss and damage. High impact, low probability, and tipping points should be further embedded, and we would like to see municipality leveraging peer-to-peer learning opportunities. We should understand and account for financial needs and obligation, and we should strengthen cross-sectorial and multi-sectorial approach. And lastly, the region should strengthen its role in facilitating the integration and harmonization of climate action through the local climate plans development and implementation. So this was all from my side, and I will pass now the mic to the next speaker, which is Alessandra Antonini from the European Committee of the Regions. Alessandra, here you have the clicker, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here. At COPS, we love acronyms, GGT, GST, GGA, GAG, so I added one more. So COR, COR at COP, what does it mean? The COR is the European Committee of the Regions, is the European institution taking care of having the reality check on EU legislation ahead of its adoption. It's a parliament of locally elected mayors and governors that screen the legislation and say what's right and what's wrong and which are their issues. And this is a kind of a unique thing in the global scale. We bring policies to the ground and we bring back the feedback from the ground. And why we come to COPs? Because we want to join forces with LGMA, and because we know that the decisions that are taken here have a huge impact in what will happen in cities and regions, and we want to have a say, not alone, together with the other networks, as ICLEI, as Global Covenant of Mayors, and all the other ones. So, if we look, of course, we can look at COP28 from many different points of view. I look at it as cities and regions, and I see three words. We see raise ambition, role of cities, and multi-level governance. And we also spoke a lot about science. Raise ambition, we know. We need to do it because we are not on track. Good, we know. We have the graphs, we have the figures. Role of cities, 3/4 of global emission, most of people living there, situation getting worse, we know. But why multi-level governance? Why we don't ask simply cities to speak with nationals, with national governments? What's the point? And that's the point of my presentation. So, we know that most of people live in cities. We know that cities are crucial, but it's not the end of the game, because scale matters, because there are issues in climate change and in sustainable development at large that really need to be addressed at a different scale, that don't stop at the border of the city and needs to have a broader angle. There is a critical mass problem, because in some cases, doing actions together is better and is more profitable. Because, of course, we have most of people living in cities, but what is outside cities matters, because it's complementary, because there's nature, there's land, there's all the ecosystem that sustain what's happening in cities. So it has to be a complementarity. It doesn't mean that if you don't have that many people living there, this is to be discarded. Just transition, we speak a lot about just transition, and we know that also in cities we have a lot of vulnerabilities, but we also have a lot of vulnerabilities in rural communities that are somehow outside the spotlight, and we need to take care of them. And then we have the urban-national divide. In some cases, when you don't have the mega cities, cities struggle in speaking directly with the national governments and need this intermediate level, be it a region, a province, or whatever we want to call it, depending on the region of the world. So what can do region or provinces do? the scale matters, so they can address mid-scale issues like, for example, adaptation, like biodiversity, these kind of issues, in synergies with cities, and in dialogue with member states, with the nations. The critical mass, they can aggregate projects and try to get financing done. Because we know that in many cases, cities don't get the money because the project is too small and they need to get together, or they don't have they can lack resources, financial resources or capacities. The fact of protecting rural areas, this is a typical task for regions, or identifying areas which are more vulnerable and subject to the specific issues with transition, and then playing as a kind of intermediate interlocutor between cities and the national governments. I will make an example. I will have to fly through the example, but I made some slides so that you have the information afterwards. This is the Local Energy and Climate Pact of Flanders. I'm not from Flanders, but I think it's a great example. So the region of Flanders decided to do a regional local energy and climate pact. They didn't build it from scratch. They said, okay, we have the Covenant of Mayors, which is great. We have the European Climate Pact, great. Let's bring it together in a framework that makes sense for all of the cities of the region. And they have a set of concrete and tangible targets, they have financial instruments, they have a monitoring portal, and they have exchange mechanism. Because of course, you can put a target, but then you have a very dense town that will struggle with trees and then can borrow some space from other towns. And here you have the coverage of this huge project with basically all the municipalities joining, the gradual approach that has brought along the cities, even if in times of crisis, and some specific characteristic of this project, which I think is a very good example, but not a one-off. So let's think of what we have ahead now. I think that we are really approaching a new era for integrated policy. This thing of synergies between climate action, SDGs, and biodiversity is coming up in the scope in all the conversation, and this happens locally. This is already happening. We need to be aware at UN and national level, avoiding having parallel streams of policies. And I think that we need to recognize much more the role of cities and regions at UN level. As we said, we have the CHAMP initiative. We had made huge steps in this COP, but these huge steps are nothing if they don't end up in the conclusions. Will become yet another pledge, yet another press release, and nothing will change. And this would be a mispromise that I think we don't deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessandra. Our next speaker is Marco Frey, Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies. Marco.
Thank you, Patrizia. I want to add an actor in our discussion because we work with regional government to support plan for climate change, for decarbonization. We work with companies. I'm the chair of the UN Global Compact Network in Italy. And there are very interesting paths about decarbonization, 10 years plan. But could be interesting to consider also the role of SMEs, because it's a very difficult point, also in the integration inside the national and local planning, and especially the capacity, the possibility to link together institutions and companies in private and public partnership. So my short suggestion about this, use one specific project. We work with the regional Chamber of Commerce in Tuscany, but we did the same work with other Chamber of Commerce in Italy, engaging SMEs. So not the capacity of investing, also the problem of finance adaptation we discussed before, but the capacity to engage and to support the path for SMEs about the knowledge of the risk of climate change, but also the possible action. As you can see, 2/3 of the impact on climate change of the economic sector in Europe is due to SMEs. Only 1/3 for large companies. And there is also a lack of knowledge, a lack of competencies, a lack of capacities in this field. What we did? A very single approach. First, a training phase. We have to transfer knowledge. We have to transfer the capacity to measure carbon footprint, to define the baseline, to put in place the improvement. Second, working together, group work phase, including other actors. And at the end, best practice and the definition of possible partnership. This is the specific contribution that I want to give you. In the final presentation of the project, we put together some local institutions and SMEs, and we presented the path that they did together. So this is a very little municipality in the Florence area, but with the addition of the Covenant of Measures since 2017, with a quite interesting path, but with a significant engagement of firms inside the municipality. And working together, they defined some possible action. In which kind of fields? The fields of management, management of energy, management of mobility, management of wastes, management of water. So all the topics related to the analysis of the NDCs that we did before. And could be interesting also the capacity of a little municipality to link together all different actors. Also investment actors. Because you know, now the attention on decarbonization is very strong from a banking institution, financial institution. So this could be an opportunity to create a good context to work in a long-term perspective. Some of the goals achieved here, and the last point, enlarging the field. Municipality of Florence, in this case, there isn't, up to now, a capacity to link in a strong partnership way the private sector, but there are the possibility to go in this direction. During the final meeting, we discussed together with the mayor of Florence about the possibility to use the single best practice of Calenzano in this direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Francesco Musco, University U of Venice. You have the clicker.
Machine. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, because probably there are still some slides of the... Okay, yes, okay. Thank you very much, because apart the great introduction organization provided by Nicola Tollin and the colleagues, different intervention of other colleagues open the floor to some kind of connection that I wish to stress, in particularly in my intervention, related in particularly the fact that the connection between the national dimension of the policies for climate adaptation have still a gap in terms of relationship with local initiatives, in the sense that especially the low definition of subnational plans and the definition of strong instruments that at local level can effectively intervene in the transformation of urban environment and also of territorial environment in general, as also Alessandro Tonini stressed, it's absolutely a point of view that we have to consider. We have to consider this point of view, obviously, in the perspective that you pose, that is the perspective of urban planning and design in particular, and because in particular the definition of the relationship between national and local instruments in terms of capacity of a national instrument to address the local capacity to provide adaptation, has to be stressed the fact that has been to underline the effectful of local instruments to real design local adaptation. The problems are different. Some have been mentioned. It's a different of interconnection between different policies, the gap between national and local government, also some difference between the capacity of national policies to really implement locally some initiatives that could afford adaptation. It's absolutely necessary to underline this aspect because in our perspective, that is more of a perspective of urban planning and urban design, the aspect of land use, the aspect of land regulation, the aspect of design adaptation at local level, but when I mean design adaptation at local level, I mean also the physical implementation of a major adaptation that obviously have a strong component that is related to the governance and to the policy, but there is also a fundamental component that is related to the physical transformation of our cities and our territories. If we want to be effective in terms of local adaptation. In this sense, the relationship between voluntary instruments, all the initiatives related to the covenant mayors, all the initiatives related to energy plans, and all other instruments that had a fundamental role, especially if we look at Southern Europe, looking at Italy, but also looking in general to Europe, in the voluntary instrument had and played a fundamental role. But at the same time, we have to point the attention to the relationship between voluntary instruments and ordinary instruments, especially related to spatial planning. In this sense, the capacity of a territory to provide analytic framework, we have to know exactly where to intervene in terms of adaptation. Otherwise, the risk is that our actions are not physically oriented, are not physically effective in terms of the transformation of the cities. In this sense, the work that many of our research centers do to feed up local policies, to feed up local instruments, to experiment also in the perspective of public engagement and local adaptation strategies tested locally, is absolutely fundamental because can help local authorities to be supportive in terms of local adaptation, arriving until solution that in some sense also provide a specific contribution of urban planning and urban design to understand how to transform local environment and absolutely at the same time understand how to provide the proper accountability of different solution adaptation. In the sense that we have to be aware that it's absolutely necessary to have an instrument, to have a system, to verify the effectful adaptation solution, and at the same time understanding that local planning instruments can play a fundamental role to regulate, to implement, and have a possibility to monitoring at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco. So our next speaker is Senaka Basnayake, Asian Disaster Preparedness Center. Senaka.
Thanks, Patricia. Good afternoon, and let me thank Professor Nicola and all colleagues for putting thoughts together and to organize this activity. So we are very happy to take part of that. I'm coming from a disaster management organization, as Patricia was mentioning, so Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, which has been like in the Asia and the Pacific region for more than 37 years now, and with a specific vision, safer communities and sustainable development through disaster risk reduction. So we are kind of like DRR as well as a climate resilient department, the organization. I'm going to talk about local level. I think all the speakers highlighted the importance. So we also feel like local-led adaptation, which we have been talking in the past, recent past, that's so important because we need to have sort of like bottom-up approach. Of course, all global frameworks which are really good at to have sort of like push to the government, but it's all equally important for us to start from the local level. So I will be sharing some of the slides related to that. So this is ADPC. How we define this, the urban resilience work. For example, like here, the first slide, it shows that, we use science to understand risks, as well as we develop systems to manage risks, as well as we apply the systems to manage or reduce the risks. So we are very much aligned with our work with all the global frameworks, which I mentioned a little while ago. And then key domains here for this specific work on urban resilience, so the risk assessment, for example, is important. That's the starting point of the way that we think. And then, of course, strengthening early warning system across all levels, regional to national to subnational to community level, as well as risk-informed decision making. I have a couple of slides on that. So community empowerment is also important when it comes to local adaptations, and sectoral preparedness as well as NBS as a solution. So if I move to the next slide. So this is a case study from Vietnam. So we implemented this project in 2 cities. It's a kind of secondary cities. What we wanted to do actually improve urban resilience in those cities. One to the north, that is Nolden, Red River Delta. The other one, Mito, the name of the city, which is the Lower Mekong. So those are deltaic sort of the cities. So they are having sort of flood issues and strong winds due to typhoons and cold waves, heat waves, as well as the drought. So what we did actually, we did very detailed risk assessment. It is not the typical way of doing risk assessment. We wanted to do climate inclusive risk assessment or climate inclusive hazard assessment. What we did actually here, we influenced the hazard layer from the future scenarios. We downscale future scenarios for the cities, and then we use that rainfall information as well as the temperature information in order to run the hazard models. So finally, what we did actually, we were able to see this map which the city of Mito developed for, that's a 15-year plan. That's a spatial development plan, 2014 to 2030. Right-hand side, you can see the risk map, hazard map that we developed for 2030. So you can see that some of the areas, light blue color, it shows the flood levels. So if you compare these two, the left-hand side, you can see number 2 and number 3, which are designated. The zonation was done for assigning the industrial zone. If you see the right-hand side, so some of the areas going to be flooded. So this is just 2030, but if you further move, 2050, 2030, 2080, so this situation will be getting more and more the flood level. So this is what we did actually towards the end. We informed them we developed sort of recommendation in order for them to think through it and then make some revisions to this, the master plan they have developed. So the community empowerment, as I was trying to highlight, that under the same project, we had several kind of capacity building programs. That is the community-based disaster management programs, the WASH sector, including the health, for example, nutrition in emergency NI program, and we also finally what we did actually risk information that we developed and we gave to the city authorities, and we introduced a software that is a visualization software so that they can also access this information. And these are the sectors that, as I was mentioning, we address the health sector issues, then WASH, the transport and energy. What we did actually, we made some recommendation for the city authorities to take forward. A couple of examples from Bangladesh. This is one example, that risk-informed planning. So this project implemented in Russia. What we did actually, this one actually from not Russia, Cox's Bazar. As you know that there was a sort of camp over there, Rohingya camps. There was a request from UNHCR to sort of do risk assessment for landslide. We did it, we gave it to them, and they were able to relocate the people. In the same year, 2018, so there was a cyclone, tropical cyclone, and it was affected the area, and then they were able to save the life as well as the property because they were able to make some adjustments. This was the same area, there's a Rega camp in Cox's Bazar. This is a hazard map for flood. We also realized that later on, with the cyclone, they were able to, there were several flood areas, and they were able to sort of save the community as well as the buildings, the informal settlements there. This also another example from Bangladesh, in Rashai project, that is actually in Rashai what we did. So they had a master plan for 20 years, and it was not insensitive or informed. We did a very detailed risk assessment for a couple of hazards like floods, droughts, fire, as well as the earthquake. And then we made recommendations, not only made recommendations, we revised the master plan in order to be sort of like risk sensitive as well as risk informed. This is another example which is from Thailand. As you could remember, 2011, there was a flood. And then after that, we were able to help them, one of the cities or the local communities, to revisit their emergency, the plan, action plan. So we had some discussions, and then we were able to help them to sort of like, improve it. So these are some of the examples from AWEN. It highlights the importance, of course, you need to work with the communities, you need to work with the local people as well as the local government in order to empower them, in order to minimize the risks. Thank you.
Thank you for your insights, Seneca. Nicola, it's time for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Patrizia and colleagues. I would like just, we have been hearing commitment, we have been hearing example of action at the international level through very important initiatives. The willingness to engage at national level and at the local level through cities and regions, also through private sector, through planning on sectorial approaches like water and health, but also means of implementation like finance. Now, we do need to shape up and strengthen our support to all this action to happen in an integrated manner. We do need to continue work on the NDC, getting down at national level also, looking at other national climate policy. We need to expand, replicate that for NAPS and LTLETs. We need to also to understand better the multilateral governance process already in place in many countries and in many regions. We do need to also understand what are the local climate plans looking like. Because they're happening, but they're happening still in far too little cities. And we need to replicate that and start to make a work in tens of thousands of cities altogether. We do need to get a cross-sectorial approach, but we need to understand better the sector, going beyond water, looking at nature-based solutions, looking at health, looking at many other points of contact. And the means of implementation beyond finance, that's at the core of what we're discussing, having a huge gap in between the current commitment, what is available, and what is needed. Also to look at technology, not to make our plans too much based on conditional technology that eventually are a bit too far to come. We need also to look at institutional capacity, legal frameworks. And for that, we need capacity building. We need to develop also clear policy recommendations, not just technical data. We need to provide appropriate guidelines, and we need also to transform our working dashboard. In order to do that, I would like here to present a knowledge framework for multi-level action. We have been working together with the organization represented here. We've been working in the past. We are continuing working and expanding our collaboration jointly together, and also with other organizations that are not here physically, but are still in a large partnership. This is a grand plan in order to create that base of knowledge that is needed to support joint and integrated action. That includes the continuation work on NDC, the replication with NAPS and LTLETs, country work, including the better understanding of jointly the urban content and national climate policies, but also understanding of national climate plans, and a multi-level governance system, to have an understanding and integration also with what is happening on the ground through local climate plans, but also the understanding of local carbon budgets and better climate risk information, including also vulnerability and exposure, for example. We need the sectorial work that we did on water, but also expanded to other sectors like health, transport, energy, etc., and to strengthen the work on finance, technology, and institution in order to get dashboarded information that's readily and always accessible, to keep on a monitoring process in the future, to develop guidelines, to have the policy brief I mentioned before, and capacity building activities. All this to give the necessary support to this constellation organization that doesn't represent only knowledge institution, but represent intergovernmental international organization that operates both at normative and operational level. To give support to them to work and support country and local governments in order to fight this climate challenge. In the word of United Nations Secretary Guterres, climate challenge is going to be won or lost in cities, and through our joint action we can act together to support action across scale, multi-level, to make this a better planet together. And thank you very much for your attention for this event. I'm really sorry because we are running out of time, so will not be much time for questions, but I would like to ask you if you are curious to engage our speakers outside, and we will just take 1 minute more for a family picture before voiding the room, if it's fine. So I would like to call our speakers here on the podium so we can take a picture. Thank you.